Many people today think of entrepreneurship as taking a lot of other people's money to fund a shoot for the moon campaign that seeks to change the world for 3 billion people. Well, our guest today is going to tell you why that's really just a common misconception, as well as give you the 5 skills of startup leaders. Keep it locked. This value-packed episode is coming up next.
Welcome to this edition of Peak Performance Podcast with your host, Thor Conklin. Thor will be sharing the necessary tools, strategies, and psychology you'll need to become a peak performer in any area of your life or business.
Thor Conklin here. We give you the tricks, the tips, the tools, the strategy, the technology, and the psychology peak performers use in order to get more done and execute at the highest level. If you know what to do but struggle with getting it all done, or simply want to raise your game to the next level, this podcast is for you. Sit back and enjoy.
Today's guest is Derek Lidow, best-selling author of Startup Leadership: How Savvy Entrepreneurs Turn Their Ideas into Successful Enterprises, as well as the book Building on Bedrock: What Sam Walton, Walt Disney, and other great self-made entrepreneurs can teach us about building valuable companies. Derek is also a frequent media contributor to publications such as the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg Businessweek, Forbes, The Economist, and Reuters. Currently, Derek is a professor at Princeton University, where he seeks to train aspiring entrepreneurs and their young companies. So if you want to improve leadership in your company, or just want some tips, tricks, and tools on how to mold your ideas into successful enterprises, then stick around. You won't want to miss this action-packed episode.
Derek, thank you very much for joining us today. I am looking forward to this show. This is one of my favorite topics, entrepreneurship. You know, it seems like it's the in thing nowadays. And I'm looking at your picture, and I think you and I have been around a little bit longer, or at least before entrepreneurship was in vogue, so to speak. What is some of the things that you've seen change over the years with regards to entrepreneurship?
Well, first, thanks for having me on your show.
Oh, my pleasure.
I've really been looking forward to it myself. And talking about entrepreneurship, well, it's my favorite subject. And I have been around and have seen the conversation on entrepreneurship shift a great deal. Back in the 60s, it was uncool to be an entrepreneur. If you had great ambition, you wanted to work for a big company and maybe go and develop products for them because they had all the resources. And it wasn't until the 70s that with the emergence of the computer industry and the semiconductor industry that entrepreneurship started catching the attention of the public. And unfortunately, the public has gotten a little fixated on entrepreneurship done in the Silicon Valley mode, and that's shoot for the moon and use other people's money. And that steered us off course, and we don't pay enough attention to what I call bedrock entrepreneurs, who are the entrepreneurs that do it with their own money and take their own personal risks and build their businesses slow and steady. So entrepreneurship has shifted a lot, but I think we need to refocus the conversation a bit on the bedrock entrepreneurs, who are the ones who really deliver all the value.
Yeah, that's so funny because, you know, when I went for funding, it was my credit card that was the funder. You know, when I started my first business, you know, I went into an incubator the other day in Atlanta, and up on the board, it's a really cool incubator environment where seasoned entrepreneurs are training young entrepreneurs how to be successful. And there was like 3 things on the board that they needed to know, you know, the business plan. The second one was fundraising. There was so much attention around fundraising. I mean, dive into that a little bit more. How do you think that's affecting things?
Well, I think our current conversation, which is if you can't raise money from strangers, then you're not a successful entrepreneur, is off base, because the vast majority of all businesses are started with relatively little amount of money. I mean, Michael Dell started Dell Computer with $1,000, and Bill Gates didn't have much more when he founded Microsoft, and the Sam Walton, who I profile in my book, he basically had $5,000 when he started. So it doesn't take much, and the statistics say that the average entrepreneur invests less than $30,000 in their business over their lifetime.
Yeah, a good friend of mine, Sarah Blakely, started her business with $5,000, and she's a billionaire because she owns 100% of the company.
Exactly, and so surprisingly, 99% of all the entrepreneurs out there, all the successful entrepreneurs as well, funded their businesses on their own. Maybe with credit cards, maybe with mortgages. But not by taking money from strangers.
Well, we were certainly committed. We weren't buying foosball tables or putting up nap rooms.
Exactly. There were a lot of rickety chairs we were sitting on.
Chairs? You had chairs? We couldn't even afford chairs.
Folding chairs.
That's right. From a church basement. I want to, your first book, Startup Leadership, How Savvy Entrepreneurs Turn Their Ideas into Successful Enterprises. Tell us, what are some of the secrets there?
Well, first off is that you can't create very much value on your own. So it's absolutely critical to learn how to work productively with others, and understanding how to lead under the stressful conditions of a startup ultimately will yield you a very potent set of skills that you can use whether you're starting a company or whether you're starting a family. And leadership in this potent form, startup leadership, is actually just a set of skills. It doesn't require any special traits. You don't have to be charismatic or the like, but you do have to be diligent in wanting to learn and get good at 5 very basic skills that all masterful startup leaders have had for eternity. And these 5 skills, quickly: self-awareness, the ability to create relationships, the real ability to motivate a group of people, ability to lead change, and then also just having a very basic understanding of how value is created out in the world and how your leadership needs to take different forms as your enterprise matures from an idea to actually involving many people.
So I got a 2-part question here. First is everyone able to master these 5 areas, or are just some people just not cut out for it?
I believe that virtually everybody can do it. Ultimately, our own individual abilities are defined by the traits that we're born with, like whether or not we're left-handed or we're really tall, or also our ability to think with numbers or hear sounds very acutely. So those are traits, things that we're born with. But ultimately, what we're driven by are our motivations. Those are things, our deep inner desires or fears, and they tend to be created by a combination of things that we experience, particularly in a family and at home, but also out in the real world. And those things that we see that we then want to have for ourselves, our desires, or maybe stay away from, our fears. So our motivations drive our actions, and everybody's motivations are individual and different. And then the third thing that defines what we're able to do are our skill sets. And that's the ability to perform a prescribed task, like cooking a souffle or doing long division. And so we can develop these strategies where skills are developed to leverage some of our traits. Every trait has some good parts to it and some bad parts to it. So let's develop skills that leverage the good parts of our traits and maybe mitigate some of the bad parts. And also understand what our motivations are so we can direct our actions to achieving the things that we actually care about.
Going through each of these 5 is, take number 1, for example. Where do people get off track with that? Where is the Achilles heel there?
Well, in the first one, it's self-awareness. It's very scary to understand what are your real motivations. I didn't understand my real motivations until I was in the 30s, and I was a executive in a semiconductor company. And when you reached a certain rank, they gave you an executive coach. But an executive coach is sort of like just really a therapist. and it's something I never would have done on my own. But this person really helped me understand what I care about. And I didn't realize that I had this deep need to be needed. That if I felt I was being excluded from something that I wanted to be part of, I really became a snot. I was very passive aggressive and manipulative in making sure that group that excluded me understood that that was a very bad decision. And so that made me a person that was, considered difficult to work with, judgmental and the like. And I had no idea what was holding me back. This lack of understanding of what I wanted and what I needed. And when that came out, oh my God, it was so much easier to just ask to be, made a part of, rather than feeling, slighted for it, or just being constructive in giving, an idea to another group, even if you're not part of it. And all of a sudden, after that, my career and my whole perspective on life really took a shift, where it was no longer about me needing to feed this mysterious drive to be needed, but I could externally help people and feel rewarded by it.
Yeah. It's kind of funny, isn't it? Once you understand what drives you, then you can also seek different ways of feeding that animal. Because once I understand it, it's like, oh, I do need that, don't I? It's like 5 Love Languages by David Chapman. Great book. And I did the quiz in the back, and it said that I need I like words of affirmation. I'm like, I don't need words of affirmation. Come on. I'm like, dude, I don't need that. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? I actually think I like it, And it was like, I was almost like rejected it. But as soon as I understood it, it was like, okay, now I understand my behavior. Once you can understand your behavior, become self-aware, it's so much easier to grow. And when you first said it, I was thinking about some of the CEOs I work with and some, that I know, and I'm like, ooh, self-aware. That's an interesting topic, because I think so often CEOs and business owners really struggle in this area. Sure.
If you feel successful, you think you don't need to learn anymore about yourself. And it's the exact opposite.
Right.
The more people you lead, the more you need to understand about yourself.
Yeah, I got a mentor that went through a very difficult time, lost about over $100 million back in the real estate crash of the 80s in Texas. And he said, yeah, everything was working. And then I got to the point where I thought I was bulletproof. And then I started smoking my own tailpipe, a typical Texas saying. He goes, that's when the downturn happened.
Exactly. With startups, it's about the crises.
Yeah.
And leading through the crises that it determines the winners from the losers. Because, when things are working well, almost anybody can keep the enterprise on the right direction. It's when things don't work out as expected that your leadership is really put to the test, and ultimately people decide whether or not they're going to continue to follow you or abandon ship because you're going to sink.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening today. I really do appreciate your time, and I hope you found today's show valuable. If you would like to receive these shows automatically to your phone or to your computer, simply go to iTunes and subscribe. After listening to several of the shows, if you're so inclined, please leave us a 5-star rating, as this helps us reach additional people and spread the message. If you're truly committed to taking your life to the next level and doing whatever it takes to become a peak performer, but something's holding you back, something is blocking your way, and you just can't seem to figure out what it is, send me an email to info@thorconklin.com, and I'd be more than happy to get on the phone with you. We'll schedule a 15-minute discovery call. No obligation, no cost. I absolutely love to hear from the listeners, and if there's something I can do to help, I'd be more than happy to do that. Also, if you found something of great interest in today's show and you want to share that with your friends and family, simply go to my Facebook page, Thor Conklin, click on the episode, hit the share button, and share it on your page. You can follow me at Twitter @ThorConklin. The website is thorconklin.com. We're constantly adding new free resources, discussing additional tricks, tips, tools, and strategies on how to be a peak performer. Remember, I try to keep these episodes short so you can listen to them during dot time, doing other things, commuting, driving, walking, working out. Decide to be a peak performer in all that you do. And until tomorrow, have an absolutely amazing day.
Be on the lookout for part 2 of our conversation with Derek, where he tells us the 3 types of relationships, as well as dives deeper into the 5 skills of startup leaders. I'll see you guys on another episode of Peak Performers Podcast.